Nightmare on Logan Street by Blue Eyes 8960. Trick-or-treat time was nearing. I went out and lit the jack-o'-lanterns, started up the spooky music, and turned on the porch light. That's this town's signal for come to this house for treats. I had the candy dish filled and I was ready to go when the first guest arrived. In the basement of a nearby abandoned church, a sinister trio gathered around an elaborate pattern drawn on the floor. Each participant was wearing a black hooded cloak and holding a cup of dark red liquid. All you could see beneath the cloaks were glowing eyes with only a hint of facial features. The hands grasping the ancient metal cups were gnarled and bony, with long, claw-like fingernails. There was a low-pitched humming floating on the fetid air that gradually increased until it was no longer heard by ears, but instead felt in the bones. A jack-o'-lantern sat in the middle of the circle, its inner candle providing the only light. The three crones raised their cups in unison as the humming reached a crescendo. Then they reached forward and slowly poured the contents onto the pumpkin. Instead of dousing the candle, it flared brightly and engulfed the room in a swirling blue fog. The witches locked hands and began pacing around the circle while chanting an evil spell. At the conclusion, the jack-o'-lantern expanded and elevated off the floor over the witches' heads. As it hung there slowly circling, a strange thing began to happen all over the city. Thump, thump, thump. That must be my first trick-or-treater, I thought, and I rushed out to open the door. Except there was no one there. That must be my first trick-or-treater, I thought, and I rushed to put on my hat and open the door. No one was there. Thump, thump, thump. That must be my first trick-or-treater, I thought, and I rushed to put on my hat and open the door. There was no one there. I looked up and down the street and didn't see any scarily costumed children on the sidewalk or emerging from cars driven by protective parents. I checked the clock and saw that it was 15 minutes past the time that trick-or-treat was supposed to have started. Shutting the door, I checked the local newspaper to make sure that I had the right day. Yes, today was Halloween, and the time was now. Where could the children be? Thump, thump, thump. I heard the noise again, but this time I got an icy feeling in the pit of my stomach. What was that noise? It sounded like a far-off scream. I went to the window and peeked through the blinds. It was pitch black outside. Not only was my porch light off, all of the street lights were off as well. Now, all the lights in the house flickered and went out. Standing there in total darkness and silence, I was sure that I heard screaming in the distance. I felt something bump against my leg, and I let out an involuntary shriek of my own. It was just Tim, our cat, and he made a hissing sound and streaked down the hall towards the guest room. Something had spooked him, and I was feeling fairly spooked myself. Now I heard sirens going off all over town. Since there was no weather activity that I knew, it couldn't be a tornado siren. What kind of emergency was this warning us about? I hadn't heard any explosion and could not see any red glow in the night sky that would indicate an out-of-control fire. Thump, thump, thump. This time the sound didn't come from outside. It sounded like it came from down the hall. That made no sense because only Tim and I were in the house, and I had never heard Tim make a sound like that. I grabbed my phone off the coffee table and turned on the flashlight. Dang, why hadn't I charged my phone today? It was down to only 15% battery. I stared down the hallway and saw a misshapen lump lying on the floor just outside the guest room door. I directed my light on it and saw that it was Tim. He was lying in a pool of blood, missing the back half of his body. Tears welled up in my eyes at what I saw, but the primal part of my brain fired up and said, "Run." I turned around and headed for the front door. I turned around and headed to the front door. I turned around and headed for the front door. All sorts of monstrous images flashing around through my head. I got the door open and flung myself down the front porch steps. I'd never seen the night look so completely black. Now I could hear screams and crying coming from all directions. though I could not see further than the scant light afforded by my dying battery. Which way should I go? My mother lives 2 streets over, and it seemed prudent to head her way. I was heading towards her house when my phone rang, and the caller ID showed that it was Mom. Thank goodness she's okay, I thought, as I clicked the answer button. As soon as the call connected, I heard Mom screaming, "The pumpkins! The pumpkins!" Before I could answer her, the line went dead. I started running towards her house, and I was confronted by my neighbors frantically barking Doberman. The barking was suddenly cut off and switched to a howl of pain. Then I heard a series of wet, chomping noises that struck terror in my heart. I changed directions and began running through another neighbor's yard, wanting to get away from those horrible sounds. I crossed the alley and made it to Mom's backyard. At that moment, my phone died, and it pitched me into complete darkness. Once the light went out and I had my night vision back. Once the light went out and I had my night vision back. Once the light went out and I had my night vision back. I could see a candle flickering in the small casement window of my mom's basement. I threw myself at her back door, only to find that it was locked. "Mom, let me in," I yelled as I pounded on the door. I heard shuffling feet coming up the stairs and saw her pull back the curtain and look at me. Her eyes widened in fright, and she pointed a finger at me. No, not at me. Behind me. Thump, thump,